Number 10. Joker. During the events of Last Night on Earth, Joker actually teams up with Batman to help him save what is left of the world, which is now pretty much a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Despite being reduced to just a head in a jar, Joker proves to be pretty useful, even kind of becoming Batman's new robotic Robin. Batman ends up taking the Joker's head to a version of the Batcave, if not the Batcave, and gives Joker a Robin mech suit, attaching his head to it, which allows Joker to control the body and help Batman in his fight against the mysterious force known as Omega. No spoilers here though, so you can read Last Night on Earth for more. Number 9. Super Skrull. Not only has Super Skrull Kl'rt now joined the side of good, basically, serving Emperor Doric VIII, aka Emperor Hulkling, aka Teddy Altman, who himself rules the alliance of the Kree and Skrull forces and is a hero, but even before that, he lended a hand to help save the universe. When the Annihilation Wave threatened the existence of all life in the universe, Super Skrull joined the opposing forces and fought against both Annihilus and his wave and the Ultron Phalanx. It just goes to show that when a problem presents itself that is bigger than his own personal vendettas, Kl'rt can put aside his differences and even become a temporary or possibly permanent hero as he fights to protect the world. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about when villains sometimes wear the mantle of hero, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. The Suicide Squad. During James Gunn's The Suicide Squad film, our lovable ragtag team of criminal misfits decide to band together, even when their mission is deemed finished by Amanda Waller, to continue the fight to save Corto Maltese and potentially the world from the wrath of Project Starfish, aka Starro the Conqueror. The final team in this film includes Bloodsport, Rick Flag, Harley Quinn, King Shark, Ratcatcher 2, Polka Dot Man, and Peacemaker. They are also joined by ally Milton at the end and the Thinker, who's kind of forced into helping them as they break into Jotunheim. While not all of them make it to that final showdown, all those still standing decide to go against orders and fight to protect the world against Starro. And guess what? They win. But I'm not going to spoil who's left alive, just in case. Just in case you still haven't seen this movie. And if you haven't seen The Suicide Squad, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it, so good. Number 7. Loki. During the Fear Itself event, Loki was the one who freed Thor, which enabled all of Midgard to be saved as they faced his villainous uncle called Borsin, the Serpent. The reason he was locked up was because he disagreed with his father, Odin. There was a prophecy that basically foretold Thor's death at the hands of the Serpent, which was a big part of the reason why Odin forbade Thor from continuing in the fight. However, Thor believed that it was his duty to protect Midgard, and Loki, who was Kid Loki at the time and on a path of redemption himself, decided to help his brother achieve his mission by freeing him. Without Loki's help, Thor would have been unable to confront the Serpent and would have therefore been unable to save the Earth. Thor, however, would die in the fight but would later return to life once more. You know, comics. Number 6. Mephisto. Mephisto actually ended up teaming up with Marvel's heroes in order to help them defeat his own son, Blackheart. Mephisto is all about making deals that usually cause a lot of harm to our heroes and generally a lot of chaos in the world that our heroes then must fight against. And yet this time around, Mephisto decided to join their side, not because he actually cared about saving the world really, but because he more refused to be outdone by his own son and admit defeat to him. The heroes who had fallen in the battle against Blackheart were resurrected and joined by Mephisto himself. However, even with Mephisto wanting to help, he still only did so while also marking the heroes with hell marks, forcibly turning them into his kind of heirs. After all, this is still Mephisto we're talking about here. The heroes succeeded in defeating Blackheart, but would then be indebted to Mephisto thereafter. Which obviously a lot of them, when they realized that, were like, I don't like that very much, but I guess hey, what can you do? Number 5. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn might be leaning more towards hero more recently in the comics, but it's important to remember that she did start out as a villainous sidekick before becoming a supervillain in her own right, and even being considered the winner of Villain of the Year. That wasn't too long ago. That's just how bad she was. But even when she was regarded as a villain, Harley would still at times do things that could be considered heroic, challenging her own and others' sense of right and wrong when it felt necessary. Harley even helped to save the world at one point from her dear friend and, you know, sometimes girlfriend, Poison Ivy. Ivy had finally had enough and decided to use her powers to take over the world, controlling the minds of citizens using veggies, which were infected by her influence before being ingested by the populace. Harley was called upon by Batman and Catwoman to do something, as they knew she was likely the only person who would be able to influence Ivy herself and hopefully convince her to stop. And guess what? They were right. Harley succeeded, and in doing so saved the world from a loss of free will. Although, to be honest, Poison Ivy ruling the world seems like it wouldn't actually be too bad. Although, you wouldn't get to choose what you wanted to do with your life, so I guess that's pretty bad. I want to live my life. I don't want Ivy to live my life for me, you know? Number 4. Thanos. When the Cancerverse struck out and attempted to corrupt the 616 reality, Thanos was one of the characters who ended up banding together with the heroes to try and put a stop to it. Sometimes willingly, sometimes not so willingly. While not a hero himself, Thanos would very much be against the Cancerverse reality infecting his own, considering that the Cancerverse reality was warped so badly as a result of the decimation of death. And as kind of like a loyal follower of death, or sometimes kind of like a herald of death, acting on death's behalf, Thanos wouldn't like that very much. Thanos is generally all about death, whether she be a lady or, you know, even just a concept. So a world without it, I can imagine, would greatly offend him. Thanos teamed up with Star-Lord and Nova using the Cosmic Cube to prevent the Cancerverse from invading the 616 reality, and ultimately risking themselves in the process as they kind of became trapped in the Cancerverse as a result. Well, they kind of trapped Thanos there first, but don't worry, Thanos got out in the end. Why would you be worried about that? I don't know. Maybe you're a Thanos fan. I'm saying that like Thanos is a good guy. I'm like, don't worry. Thanos made it. He's alive. Thank goodness. Number 3. Black Adam. Black Adam is a villain whose purpose and motivation generally leads to him acting as a hero or an anti-hero at times. He was part of Lex Luthor's anti-crime syndicate in Justice League and stood against that team of villainous heroes from the reality of Earth 3, taking on Ultraman himself in a one-on-one fight. Black Adam has also worked with DC's heroes before, even though he was known initially as a Shazam or Captain Marvel villain in the comics. He's not only been an ally, but even a team member, actually joining the Justice League as a member at times. I think he's also been part of the Justice Society, so yeah, he's one of those guys that's constantly saving the world, but then also endangering the world, depending on the day. Number 2. Dr. Doom. During the events of the 2015 Secret Wars over at Marvel Comics, Dr. Doom ended up taking on the heavy responsibility of saving the world, or at least doing his best to save the world. He ends up accepting, or perhaps rather taking, the power needed in order to save the remnants of all the alternate universes which have basically collided in the incursion, creating a new place also known as Battleworld. Which is a new battle world, but we've heard the name Battle World before, just to be clear. Doom becomes the ruler of this new world and is now referred to as God Emperor Doom, and is worshipped as a god by many citizens whose lives he has managed to save and preserve, although they don't really know everything that happened before. Unfortunately, while Doom managed to save a lot of folks, the world was kind of a patchwork style-like quilt that was a bit of a mess in areas, to be honest. Eventually, the residents of this world realize that they are being somewhat manipulated by Doom, and many of them rise up in revolt, because they don't like that very much. Eventually, Doom battles against Mr. Fantastic, who takes Molecule Man's power for himself. Doom had been using this power prior to create and manage Battleworld, but Mr. Fantastic takes it to rebuild the multiverse properly, and all the universes within it, tweaking things here and there to improve them. Or improve them from, you know, Mr. Fantastic's point of view. But Doom was the one who actually prevented everything from getting full-on blowed up in the incursions to begin with, and so he did his part for sure. I mean, without Doom, the world probably wouldn't even exist anymore, so just saying. Number 1. Lex Luthor. In Justice League Unlimited, Lex gets a great moment of redemption when he is the one to destroy Darkseid during the series finale episode titled Destroyer. During the battle against Darkseid, Luthor shows up right at the end as Superman is about to have his heart carved out by Darkseid. Lex offers Darkseid the only thing that he really could, the thing Darkseid wants most: the anti-life equation. However, when Darkseid reaches out to take the equation from Lex, Luthor uses his newfound power to make them both disappear, defeating Darkseid and saving both Superman and the world, seemingly at the cost of his own life.
Coming in at number 10, we have Poison Ivy, specifically the version seen in the 2015 video game Batman Arkham Knight. As a recurring boss battle in the previous games in the series, Poison Ivy was one of the standout villains in a trilogy best known for making the player truly feel like they were fighting as Batman. In the grand finale, however, Poison Ivy no longer wanted to ally herself with the Scarecrow's plan to take over Gotham, initially refusing to join his League of Villains, and later even sacrificing her own life in order to help grow an ancient tree that will help work as an antidote to the Scarecrow's toxins plaguing the city. At the end of the day, this version of Poison Ivy just cared about her plants and the greenery of Gotham, and was willing to sacrifice her life for the good of the city as long as her friends could live. Coming in at number 9, we have Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, aka the Red Hulk. For years, General Ross had been the lead military commander in charge of tracking down and capturing the Incredible Hulk, and has been a persistent thorn in Bruce Banner's side. But following the death of his daughter and the Hulk's exile into outer space, Ross was manipulated by MODOK and several other supervillains into becoming the Red Hulk, in case his nemesis should ever return. And while for a time the Red Hulk was a feared adversary for the heroes who remained on Earth, Ross would eventually see to reason and become a functioning member of the Avengers, teaming up with them to save Earth from the power of the Infinity Gauntlet, and proving that a Hulk doesn't have to be green to occasionally do some good. Coming in at number 8, we have Dr. Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow. Best known for being a fear-based nemesis of Batman's, Dr. Jonathan Crane found himself in the unique position to help save the entire universe during the DC Comics event known as Blackest Night. With the Green Lantern Corps facing off against an undead army of Black Lanterns, it was discovered that Scarecrow's exposure to fear toxin made him one of the few beings in existence capable of being undetected by the Black Lanterns. To make use of this quirk, Scarecrow was gifted a yellow power ring, and allowed to join the Sinestro Corps as they briefly teamed up with their rival colors, allowing Jonathan Crane to use his mastery of fear for the good of the entire DC multiverse. Coming in at number 7, we have the infamous Norman Osborn. Perhaps best known as being the alter ego of Spider-Man's nemesis, the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn has long been one of the biggest threats in the Marvel Universe, manipulating events from afar as the feared CEO of Oscorp. Following the invasion of Earth by the Skrull army, Norman found himself suddenly in the public eye and with goodwill after being the one to personally defeat the Skrull Queen. Norman would use this influence to lead the Dark Avengers as the Iron Patriot, a twisted version of superheroics that would help protect the Earth from several world-ending threats, but also saw Norman slowly giving himself more and more power over the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. So, does it still count as saving the world if you did it for bad reasons? And we'll let the philosophers debate that one. Coming in at number 6, we have the iconic X-Men villain Apocalypse. Born thousands of years ago under the name En-Sabah-Nur as one of the very first mutants, Apocalypse has long been an ancient thorn in the X-Men's side, as he often tries to rally his horsemen of the Apocalypse and take over the entire planet. But with the new mutant status quo seeing all of mutant kind suddenly living at peace and with many quarrels ended, Apocalypse has surprisingly enough been one of the biggest supporters of the new island of Krakoa. Claiming it's the realization of everything he's always wanted for mutants, Apocalypse put down his arms against the X-Men and instead only wields his blade now to fight for Krakoa and mutant influence, protecting the island from threats that might seek to destroy the new mutant homeland. Coming in at number 5, we have ATROCITUS, leader of the Red Lanterns. A violent warrior that became consumed with rage after he believed the Guardians of the Universe let his family die, ATROCITUS formed the Red Lanterns as an outlet for his fury and as a way to destroy both the Green Lantern Corps and their most esteemed warrior at the time, Sinestro. This rage would often bring him into conflict with the various Lanterns, but ATROCITUS was luckily able to be reasoned with during the Blackest Night event, which saw the Red Lanterns grudgingly teaming up with the rest of the color spectrum against the undead Black Lantern army. And hey, if an unstoppable force of zombie aliens can't bring enemies together, what can? Coming in at number 4, we have the villainous Superman of the Injustice universe. In the Injustice branch of the DC multiverse that's been depicted in both comic books and video games, the Man of Steel is not somebody to be messed with. After being tricked by the Joker into killing his own wife and daughter, this Superman has gone full villain, taking over the world with brutal efficiency and force. In the sequel video game, Injustice 2, however, Superman once again finds himself having to be the hero when he is broken out of Batman's prison in order to defend the world against a Brainiac invasion. This Superman may want to rule the world, but there needs to be an actual planet to rule, and so he grudgingly helps the heroes that imprisoned him fight back against a new threat that might just be too big for all of them to handle. Coming in at number 3, we have Dr. Otto Octavius, specifically the version seen in Sam Raimi's 2004 film, Spider-Man 2. This movie is one of my favorite superhero films ever, and a large part of that is due to its complex and sympathetic villain in the form of Dr. Octopus. This version of Doc Ock isn't robbing banks or threatening people just because he's evil, but because he's lost control of the mechanical arms attached to his body while being overwhelmed with grief from the death of his wife. In the end, however, Otto is able to regain control of his body and realizes what his ego and drive to create the fusion generator have done, and willingly sacrifices himself to save both New York City and the recently unmasked Peter Parker. Still brings a tear to my eye just thinking about it. Coming in at number 2, we've got a special shout out to practically every Batman villain except the Joker. During the 2014 event known as Batman Endgame, no relation to the MCU, the Joker has finally decided to end his years-long battle with Batman, feeling that the Caped Crusader no longer valued their relationship. Planning to kill everyone in Gotham City, the Joker started a parade of murder with the bat symbol hanging upside down in the sky above Gotham, a symbol for all of Batman's enemies to gather if the Batman ever died. In a twist, however, it was Batman himself who lit the signal, knowing of his villain's pact, and makes an offer to the assembled rogues gallery to help take back the city from Joker. It's one of the best moments in Batman comics over the last decade, and seeing all of Gotham's villains team up against the Clown Prince of Crime is truly something to behold. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the iconic Darkseid. If there was any DC villain that you would expect to never ally with the side of good, it would be Darkseid. But during the 2001 Our Worlds at War event, that's exactly what took place. When the villain Imperiex threatened to reignite the Big Bang and completely reset the DC universe, Darkseid grudgingly realized the destruction of the universe would mean he'd never be able to accomplish his own evil goals. Thus, he proposed an alliance with both Lex Luthor and Superman to help defeat the universe-exploding threat, using his boom tubes to hold off Imperix's energy attacks while the superheroes attempted to stop the villain once and for all. And while Darkseid and Superman would go back to being eternal enemies after this, it was still nice to see them working together, even if it was only for a couple issues.
Number 10, Poison Ivy. So while Poison Ivy usually stays pretty confined to her roots in terms of where she calls home, haha, get it? On a smaller scale, she has worked to save what she would consider her world within Gotham. Poison Ivy would do anything to save the environment, as we all know, even at the expense of destroying humanity. Many would think that to her, a perfect world would in fact be one without any humans to harm her beloved plant children. Although in most cases, most people would be right in regards to this assumption, Ivy does have a few exceptions when it comes to loving humans. She has a sort of odd love of Batman and a full-on girl crush for her girl Harley Quinn. She has even passed on world domination for Quinn. But she also saved a good amount of people in Gotham during the events of No Man's Land, when she set up shop in Robinson Park and actually cared for any people who found their way there, referring to them as her orphans and acting as their protector. She also helped Batman to secure produce for the people of Gotham. And when it comes to real world means of saving the planet, Ivy also does her part, speaking at climate change conferences in an attempt to inspire change through others. Number 9, Norman Osborn. Green Goblin and Norman Osborn has done an insane amount of imaginatively awful things to Spider-Man and others who got in his way. He wasn't the only one dealing with the events of Secret Invasion, But Osborn did manage to save the world during that event when he dealt the kill shot to Veronica, the SKRULL Queen. As such, he is awarded with the trust of the President of the United States, who disbands S.H.I.E.L.D. and allows Osborn to build a new agency in its stead. Osborn then creates HAMMER, which doesn't actually stand for anything in terms of the acronym. He creates his own team of superheroes built out of former supervillains, which he calls the Dark Avengers. Or which we call the Dark Avengers? I don't know. He probably just calls them the Avengers. While Osborn is a flawed hero at best, his team do manage to track down and take out the Molecule Man when they discover he is responsible for a series of missing persons. Number 8. Lex Luthor. Lex has often stepped up to the plate to begrudgingly help Superman when the world is truly at risk. Why? Because ultimately Lex's primary beef is with Superman, not the entire world. In truth, he is only a villain in terms of the entire Earth, because going up against Superman usually means putting the planet at risk. But when another greater threat reveals itself, Luthor will often put the greater good before his personal vendetta. There is a story where Luthor was actually the only hero on Earth as well. Yep, though this wasn't Alexander Luthor, not specifically Lex Luthor. Alexander was actually the Earth 3 version of Lex himself. Earth 3 is an Earth where the only supers are villains, but when two good versions of Superman follow two evil villains of Lex Luthor there and are forced to go up against Kryptonian Ultraman, Alexander steps in to save the day, making him the only hero on Earth 3, where the crime syndicate is obviously from. That is before Earth 3 was destroyed in Crisis on Infinite Earths and then rebooted and altered. So now Alexander's, well, he's not as cool. He's not really a hero anymore. Kind of crazy. Number 7. Loki. During the Axis storyline, Wanda inverted all superhero and supervillain moralities, making those who are good bad and those who are bad good. Instead of embracing and simply enjoying this change as Loki finally gets to be seen as a hero for a while, Loki actually fights tirelessly to reverse the state of the world and help out the heroes who are currently trapped inside villainous mentalities. During his time acting as a hero, Loki was known as the god of heroism and truth, and was even worthy enough to lift Thor's hammer. Loki at his best. Number 6. Magneto. While Magneto may have a more forceful strategy when it comes to fighting for mutant rights, he is ultimately trying to do something noble. Sort of. The main difference between Eric and Charles is that Charles' vision is to create harmony between humans and mutants, where Eric simply wants humans out of the way, as he believes they do not necessarily deserve to live among mutants. Magneto is even sometimes stated as being the better leader between the two, and lately Magneto's beliefs seem to have even affected Charles for the better, as the two work together in the House of X to build a new life for the mutants on Krakoa. Despite being painted as a villain, this isn't the first time Magneto has joined with the X-Men. In fact, he has joined with them so many times that I have just lost count, flip-flopping back and forth between noble acts and dastardly ones. In Age of Apocalypse, he even worked with the X-Men to save the world from Apocalypse, even managing to tear Apocalypse apart piece by piece until all that was left was his head. Number 5. Harley Quinn. If you have not read any of the 2016 Batman series by Tom King and David Finch, well, you need to change that. There's one particular story arc that sees Batman and Catwoman coming up alone against Poison Ivy after she's taken over the entire world. The two try to convince her to release her hold on everyone and attempt to defeat her, but ultimately realize that she's just too powerful and they are no match for her. Fortunately, they know just who is. They come up with a plan to free Harley Quinn from Ivy's grasp just long enough to convince Ivy to chat with Harley. What they ultimately know is that Harley holds such a sway over Pamela that the two are so close that she'll be able to talk Pamela down. Poison Ivy is in pain, which is why she's trying to save the world by enslaving everyone. She feels the need to fix it. Harley defeats her by telling her it's okay to be hurt, and that they can be hurt together. She knows that Ivy can save the world, but she asks, just for today, that they instead focus on saving Pam. So cute. Just saving the world with her words. Snap. Number 4. Dr. Doom. This villain has saved many people every now and then. Victor Von Doom is a genius and a leader. He rules over Latveria, which is an ultra-controlled but very peaceful nation. And many remember when he was God Emperor Doom after the events of an incursion where he became a god in order to save the multiverse by creating his own battle world. Although many of us are familiar with that story, I would argue one of his best storylines thus far in regards to saving the world from global threats is in the infamous Iron Man storyline, where we see Victor take up the mantle of Iron Iron Man. As Iron Man, he defeats an entire room full of supervillains who have created an alliance to actually take him down. And later, he also manages to defeat MEPHISTO. The best part is the group of villains actually think that joining together will protect them from doom. And just as they are discussing this, they're promptly defeated by him. Number 3, the Joker. That's right, in a storyline where superheroes came up against their greatest challenge, Joker stood with them to help them save the world. The challenge? Nuclear war. A real world threat too. Granted, in the event of an actual nuclear war, we'd most likely see all life on Earth obliterated. But in the Superman comic Distant Fires, Superman ventured outside of the ruins of Metropolis to find a post-apocalyptic community built by surviving superheroes and some supervillains, including the Joker himself. You see, the blast had caused the supers to lose their powers, but for Joker, it allowed him to regain his sanity. In this scenario, we saw him as a sane do-gooder and a leader, working hard to help the survivors of the blast. Although it didn't really work forever, Joker still was successful in helping humanity to survive for as long as they could, even building a generator to grant the community electricity. Nuclear devastation is a pretty hard one to beat. Let's try to not have a nuclear war. Seems like a bad idea. Number 2, Thanos. While the MCU would have us believe that Thanos is one of the worst, the comics, they would also pretty much have us believe that, so. But there are times that even the Mad Titan has felt that a supervillain was going too far. Thanos wanted the Infinity Stones in the comics to destroy half of the universe's population to earn the affections of Mistress Death, which granted sure is pretty awful. Killing that many people just to impress a sweetheart seems pretty extreme. But Magus, the evil version of Adam Warlock, was even worse. He wanted the stones so he could destroy all life. Pretty bad. This threat actually saw Thanos join the heroes and play a key role in defeating Magus. Even the most evil of characters can be one of the good guys sometimes, it seems. We even see a version of Thanos that ends up leading the Avengers in issue 10 of the 2016 Thanos comic series. Shocking. Even more shocking, he seems like pretty okay with that alternate version of himself. Number 1. Darkseid. In the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, Darkseid ends up joining with the heroes who take on the Anti-Monitor for good, after he seeks to destroy the last known Earth. Darkseid was one of the crucial few in the fight, able to weaken Anti-Monitor long enough for Superman to get that final blow. And Alexander Luthor, who I was actually talking about earlier, was also one of the other important supers to help in this fight. Very strange that both Darkseid and Thanos, who are known for being a couple of the biggest bads around, have both come together with supers for the greater good of the entire Earth's existence. And or the entire universe's existence, I should say. I guess that is ultimately what you need if you want to turn some of the most evil villains momentarily good. Just a really big threat. The biggest threat.